Good evening. I know this is a small room, but good evening.
Good evening.
There we go. All right. Just a slight correction. I was at the department for 12 years before being appointed sheriff. Got to get that time in. So, yes, my name is Steve Tompkins. I supervise the National Street Jail that houses pretrial detainees, those that cannot make bail or for whatever reason, if their crime was that egregious, they cannot leave us. I supervise the South Bay House of Correction, where you go or where a person goes if their sentence is 2.5 years or less. On average, women are there 8 months and men are there 14 months. And I also see the Civil Process Division. I like to start with what our mandate is. And our mandate is care, custody, and control. And when I stand in front of people, I like to explain what each one of those words mean. And I start with custody. And if you look up the word custody, it has two definitions. The first is imprisonment. And that's what the taxpayers pay us to do, to keep their persons and their property safe. The second meaning, and one that really resonates with my administration, is guardianship. And I say that because I sincerely believe that we are our brothers and sisters' keepers. I do believe that if we have the ability to help our fellow man and woman, that it's incumbent upon us to do that. And so guardianship to me is very important. And the way we do that, we have 3 tracks of education. We have the adult literacy track that leads straight to the GED, and we push everyone towards that track if they do not have a GED. The second track is special ed for those that need special ed, and the third is vocational education. And we place a heavy emphasis on vocational education. In 2005, I began a program called the Common Ground Institute, where we teach carpentry, landscaping, custodial maintenance, painting, and printing. 2 years ago, we began an urban farm. This year, in the fall, we're starting a culinary arts program. Next year, we're going to start a hospitality program. Wow. Is that a minute I've spoken or I've got a minute left? Okay. All right, so now this is on steroids. I got to go real quick. Control is that element that allows us to reconfigure the way a person thinks or acts, and care, which is the most important part, is that element that allows us to have a continuum of service for folks once they leave us. I think it's highly important that we stay in touch with folks once they've left us, and that they stay in touch with us. In the event that they do something that may get them sent back to jail, call us first, and let's see if we can't match you up with a social service agency that can help you. But here's the thing also. I believe the hallmark of any vibrant community, the hallmark of a vibrant society, is how we care for and take care of the most compromised in that society. Whether it's folks that have been incarcerated, youth, seniors, immigrants, that's what I believe society is all about if we are, in fact, going to be a thriving community. It actually begins in school, okay? And what we did in 2005, again, I started a program called the Choice Program, where we send officers we started at the high schools, we're in the middle schools now, and we're going to actually step down to the elementary schools. What we wanted to do was 2 things. One, we wanted to have our officers talk to kids about public safety. But we also wanted to have an experience for youth where they had an exchange with an adult in a uniform when they were not in trouble. There are 3 things that I see as almost a direct shot, not necessarily to jail, but to a hard road to hoe, so to speak. The first is poverty. The second is a fractured household. And the third is a compromised school system, frankly. So when you talk about how we keep young boys and girls of color out of the penal system, we actually have to look at what's going on at the home front and do what we can to see if we can't help the home. And then that goes all the way through. Most of the folks that are with us are truants. They dropped out of school at a very early age. A lot of the folks that are with us went through what's now called the Department of Children and Families. It used to be DSS years ago when I was a kid. And so we really have to start there. We have to look at that. It costs between $13,000 and $20,000 to educate. It costs $46,000 to incarcerate. I have 1,600 people in my facility now. And so we really, really have to look at what we want to be. If we call ourselves, the leaders of the free world, we cannot put this many people in jail. We cannot. 85%, I know you probably have another question, but let me say this. 85% of the folks that are with us, 85% of the folks that are with us are there because of some involvement with drugs. 42% present with some form of mental illness, from the most passive to the most aggressive. I say that to say this. These are folks that should be in a detox bed or a mental health bed and not in a jail cell. But because the budget does not have enough money for those two things, there's a scarcity of those beds. If someone does something wrong, it's a straight shot to prison. That's not where they should be. So we really need to look at more diversionary programs, those programs that keep folks out of jail, more assistance and more resources and beds for detox and mental health. The question was, what is our relation, the Sheriff's Department relationship with the mayor? Now, that's a really good question. In years past, we had an okay relationship with City Hall. Not bad, but not as involved as we would have liked to have been. Marty Walsh is someone that I've known for the last 12 years. And when Marty was running for mayor, I met with all of the candidates. I didn't endorse any of the candidates because I knew them all and I had a working relationship with all of them. After the primary, I met with both John and Marty, and I was sitting in Marty's kitchen, at his kitchen table, and he said something to me that really, once again, resonated with me. He said, when I become mayor, we're going to pull corrections closer to that law enforcement continuum that basically starts with the DAs and the police that investigate and arrest, the courts that adjudicate, and then us. And that and then us, corrections, was always like the caboose on the train. We were the folks where, lock them up, throw away the key. If we are the house of correction, we have to correct situations. We cannot warehouse people. It just does not work. And so what Marty said was he was going to pull us closer. And I remember when I left his house, I got in my car and I said to myself, this guy is going to be the next mayor. Because the way he said, when I become mayor, was not said in a boastful sort of way. It was just said in a very matter-of-fact way that just gave me the sense that he would win. Now, when he did win, on his inauguration day, he had a public safety meeting. And he had 15 or 16 organizations at the table. And for the first time, corrections was at the table. Not only were we at the table, we were at the head of the table. It was at the time the interim commissioner, who is now the commissioner of the police, the mayor, and myself. And then down both sides of the table were public service and law enforcement agencies and social service agencies. So we feel really good about how Marty is pulling us into the mix and the things that we can get done, the programs that we can effectuate to keep folks out of jail. So we feel really good about it, and we have a really good relationship. Well, now the recidivism rate, those that come back frequently, is 46%. And so we have a wealth of programs, and frankly, particularly for the female population, I'm just picking up where Andrea Cabral left off. When we first arrived there in 2002, women did not have programming. Women did not have access to recreation, basically. They stayed on their tier. And Andrea changed that entire dynamic around.
What percent do they represent?
We only have today, we only have 115 women. So it's a very, 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 very small percent of our total population. But that said, they need to have the same services, the same access to education, the same access to recreation, everything that the male population gets, which is overwhelming, the female population also has to get. When you ask why are they there, once again, a lot of that is because of some involvement with drugs. Now, we have a program called the CREW program, where we work with the female population to really get them the services that they need. Now, for the female population, which is much smaller than the male population, women actually, programming is mandatory for women. It's not mandatory for men yet, but it will be. And here's the reason why. We feel that it's not enough just to sit around while you're doing time. Unfortunately, you're here. But if you're here, let's see if we can't work with you to improve your station in life, to teach you or work with you to get the services that you need so you don't come back. And the women really do appreciate the programming. Even if it weren't mandatory, I think they would take the programming anyway, because who wants to sit in a box, all day? But with the CREW program, that continuum of care that I spoke about, we had a grant that allowed us to work with the women for up to 2 years after they left, intimately, very intimately work with them. Once the grant ended, Andrea still kept that in place, and I still keep that in place, because that's the important thing that we need to do. We need to have that, and one of the words that I use always, and if you ask John Walsh, the former chair of the Democratic Committee, What word, if you ask him, give me a word about Steve Tompkins, he would say sustainability. Sustainability. And that's what I've always talked to John about, because if we do this as a flash in the pan, it's not going to work, you see. No, on average, we have somewhere between 28 and 32 for the entire population, male and female. We used to take kids at 17, but the Senate just passed a law 18 and up. When you're in an adult facility, you don't, your parents' access to you is limited. And so what the state did was to basically have kids under 18 with the DYS system so that their families could stay involved. But yeah, the upper 20s, the lower 30s is on average, the age on average. When I was appointed sheriff, it was around budget season. And our budget is somewhere around $106 million annually, okay? Give or take a couple of million. And what I realized early on is I know that the fiscal year ends at the end of June. And I was perplexed by the fact that we were only funded, historically, this happens every year, into the first week of May. And then you have to go and you have to talk to legislators and, ask for more money for some, okay? And when I asked about that, it was explained to me that agencies may not use all of the money that they've been allotted. And so, figure that one out. Because they know what we do, because we do the same thing year in and year out, but that's okay. So we go up and we talk to them for more money. But I said, as I'm sitting across the table from these legislators, I said, who amongst you has been to the Suffolk County Sheriff's Department? Who has seen what we actually do? Nobody, none of them had ever been there, right? And so what I did was I invited them. I said, come on in, come see what we do. Now, we were going into FY14 at that time, $5 million down, okay? After that invitation, the mayor's been there, a cadre of other legislators have been there, the House Speaker's been there, Stan Rosenberg, who's going to replace the Senate President, has been there. Once they got to the facility, not only did they have an opportunity to experience the programming that we do, but they also had an opportunity to talk to our workforce as well as our inmate population. And so we're going into FY15, $2 million down versus $5 million down. And I believe that happened because they were somewhat educated and they could actually see where those dollars were going. And I was quite frankly taken aback a little bit that folks have jurisdiction over our dollars, but they did not know what we were doing with those dollars, you see. And so it was great that they came in to see exactly what we've done, and I feel good about that. Yeah, we use volunteers, interns. We have kids from Boston College. Yes, I'm a Boston College graduate. Thank you very much. But no, a number of the schools. So no, we do, and that's really important to us because I see the folks that come in to work inside of the department with our population, frankly, as ambassadors for the department. They come into the department, they see how we comport ourselves, how we do what we do, how they can help us do what we do, and then they go and tell others, their friends, their families, their legislators. And so we have a wealth of volunteers that come in all the time. In fact, this summer, I put a little money aside to hire 20 kids. In fact, Matt O'Malley sent us an extraordinary young lady for summer jobs. And so we hired 20 kids from throughout Suffolk County, and the jail is like a small city. So we have communications, transportation, accounting, you name it, we do it. And so we have the kids work in all of those areas. They do not work with the inmate population, but everything that makes the facility run, they have some experience. And then we take them to the courthouses and to other places. Like we had John Gibbons, what is his position? U.S. Marshal come in. We've had Willie Gross come in. We've had others come in to talk to these kids because we want to give these kids an experience in law enforcement with the hope that either, one, they stay out of trouble during the summer, but that they would see law enforcement as a vocation and want to go to school for that, maybe come work for us or maybe work for others. So we feel really good about that. So we have volunteers all the time. Well, let me say this, and there's two ways. One is by working with the inmate population, the Common Ground Institute that I talked about. We actually have a waiting list for folks that want to get in that program. We keep the programs small. That program's small. There's only 15 folks that go through that program, and it's about a 12-week program. And so the fact that we have folks waiting to get in, we see that as a success. Two, as most of you have heard, when folks go to jail, racial groups segregate and stay unto themselves. Well, in this program, you know, whites and blacks and Latins, we have a very, very small Asian population, all work together. What we found is once they got back to their tiers, they were still communicating with one another and still working with one another and still having meals with one another. Now, that was an unforeseen byproduct of what we were doing, but that worked out pretty well. And so we continue to have create programming that inmates will be able to take advantage of and get employed. And we've worked with a number of employers who have helped us with employment. On the flip side, the workforce. Now, there's been a lot made about the fact that I didn't come up through law enforcement. My background is in communications, marketing, public relations. And I think that's actually served me well because I'm not jaded by what is law enforcement. I do not warm up to that old thing about, you know, this is the way we've always done it, so that's the way we're going to do it. That just didn't make sense to me. And I also was very uncomfortable with the chasm between the unions and management. So when I first became sheriff, one of the first things I did was actually to establish an Office of Veterans Affairs. We didn't have an Office of Veterans Affairs. We have some active veterans, and then we have a bigger cadre of veterans. And I felt it was important for them to be able to get the information at the job site than to have to run down or call the VA when we can just offer that. But the second thing I did was to meet with my union's executive boards. Now, I have 2 officer unions. Every other sheriff has 1. I have 2 because when Deer Island and Charles Street were put together, they did not collapse the unions into 1. And so what I said to them was, I said, look, we've got a number of large initiatives to move this organization forward. We need to do that in tandem. I can't go to City Hall or the State House and ask for resources and run the risk of them saying, you can't even keep your own house together, so we're not going to give you more money. To that end, each, and I know I've only got like 30 seconds, had 10 items that they wanted to talk about. And we went down each list, and I said, these are the things that I can do, and I did it immediately. These are the things that I'm not going to do, and it's not even negotiable. We're not going to talk about it anymore. And then the third was, these are the negotiable items, and we're working on those. And then 2 weeks later, I took the presidents out to a costly, I must say, steak dinner, you know, where we had an opportunity to get to know each other. Now, the fact that I've been there for 12 years prior to becoming sheriff served me well. So I wasn't like an unknown commodity to them. To that end, for the first time ever in Suffolk County history, my officer unions have endorsed me as sheriff. That has never, ever, ever happened. And what that says to me is they realize, as I realize, it's not about me and it's not about them, but it's about us. And we have to do this collectively because there were sheriffs before me and there's going to be sheriffs after me.
That's all we have time for.
Okay. Hey, thank you, sir. Thank you.